pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Canty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Consistent with modifications made to the open meeting law by the Legislature of the Commonwealth, this meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Members of the board are joining us physically in person here at the Great Hall at Town Hall. Members of the board may be joining us virtually over the Zoom webinar platform. Members of the public who wish to observe or participate in this meeting may do so by joining us here at the Great Hall, or may join us over Zoom at the Zoom webinar link that is posted on the town website within the agenda for this meeting. Members of the public that wish to simply observe the meeting may also do so by tuning into Comcast Channel 9 or Verizon Channel 47. Also, consistent with Massachusetts general law, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of the Select Board after notifying the chair, subject to reasonable requirements of the chair, so as not to interfere with the conduct of the meeting. At the beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any recordings. We have been notified that there may be a member of the press, Fred Tice, who will be making some recordings, as well as, of course, the local scene, formerly known as PAC TV, is recording and broadcasting this particular item. And we have another individual who's making a recording. Okay, so there is another individual in the audience also making a recording. That concludes the opening announcements, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Canty. Moving right on to the licenses. Any questions or comments? Wish of the board?
If there are no questions or comments from my colleagues, I would make a motion to approve the listed licenses and petitions and alterations of premises as a group.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Mahoney. Discussion? Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Golden's remote.
Yep,
I vote yes as well.
okay. I didn't know you were up there. I'm sorry, Mr. Golden. I was just going to say Mr. Golden will be joining us in a few minutes, but
No
I'm
problem.
glad I
Thank you,
didn't
sir.
say it. Okay, unanimous. Thank you. First item on the agenda is no place for hate. 4 vacant seats, 2 3-year terms, 1 2-year term, 1 1-year term, Plymouth South High School student, the last one. And we have 1 applicant, Linda Jones. Is Linda
Chairman,
Jones?
earlier today, she asked to withdraw the motion temporarily while she attend a couple of meetings for the No Place for Hate Committee,
Okay,
if that's okay.
sure. So we'll withdraw, okay. Zone and Boards of Appeals, 1 appointment, 1 vacant seat, 1 1-year term, and the applicant, I believe, is Mr. Peck.
Thank you for consideration. As you know, I was a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals through 2023 as vice chair. I moved to the planning board for 1 year because I wanted to work on such things as the ADU bylaw and getting the master plan approved by town meeting, both of which were. And my experience on the planning board was that it was essentially the same identical review. I'd look at the drawings, I'd look at the context in the neighborhood and listen to the neighbors, and but the planning board makes the recommendations to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Zoning Board of Appeals would makes a final decision. So the same amount of work, which I enjoy doing, reviewing the drawings and figuring out what's best for the community. I'd like to go back. It's an alternate opening, I know, and that's fine. I can still be part of the group dynamic analyzing petitions coming before them. So I'd welcome your support to go back as an alternate.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Peck. Any questions or comments? Mr. Blitzer?
I just have one question. Who's the alternate now? Is somebody stepping down?
Phil Riccardi.
Oh, Phil.
His family is, they bought a house. In fact, I think they closed on it in Florida. So he will be, more than half of the year down in Florida. So he could have waited and made as many meetings as possible, but he decided to step down.
Yeah. Well, we wish him well, and,
He's a good man and a friend.
yeah, he is.
Mr. Canty, then Mr. Mahoney.
Hi, David.
Hello, Kevin.
So in terms of, obviously, you've served on the ZBA before. This is an alternate. You've been a permanent member before, or a full member before. Is there anything you'd like to see from your prior tenure that you'd like to do differently this time, or anything you liked about last time that you'd like to see continue if you were to be appointed to the ZBA again?
Not really. I thought by and large it worked. I think being respectful to the applicants, I'd say, occasionally the ZBA has been perceived as being a little less open to community input, but by personality and as vice chair, I particularly was attuned to listen to the community.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Mahoney?
David, obviously I support your candidacy, especially how there's nobody else in the contest here. But no, I know what your resume is, and I know that, how you served this committee in a prior time. But more importantly, with respect to tonight's agenda, do you have dinner plans? And what I mean by that is, can you hang around for the next agenda item?
Yes, I will be available.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And I've worked with you on many things,
Yeah.
David, so you have my vote, Okay, then, wish of the board.
I'd make a motion to appoint David Peck to the one-year term of the Zoning Board of Appeals alternate.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Blitzer. Discussion? Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes,
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. CPC project update, 10 Oak Street.
Good evening. Thank you for the board for allowing me to come and speak upon this topic. My name is Chris Plord. I'm the Assistant Executive Director of the Housing Authority. I'm here tonight to request an additional funding in the amount of $140,000 to complete the Oak Street conversion that we've been working on. This conversion is converting the old school building into 3 affordable subsidized units. And these units will be directly housing our local elderly, veteran, disabled community. So that, I know it's a big need that we're looking for. But just kind of give some background, the request came in. This is our third request for funding. We submitted it to the CPC. I met with them on Thursday. There's an immediate need for this funding so it can get completed, get occupied, and not sit vacant anymore. So without having to perhaps go to spring meeting, it was suggested that we, come before the select board to see if there's any other avenues we could seek to award this funding. And also at that CPC meeting, it was discussed to try to meet with the building committee. I was not able to meet with the whole committee. I was able to meet with David this morning, and we did go over the project and discuss how we have gotten here today and why I'm requesting an additional funding. I am committed to working with the building committee and going to their meeting on the 12th for the duration of this project. I think they're a great asset to this town. Wish we were able to bring them on at the beginning. It probably would have helped alleviate some of these, I guess, issues and concerns. I don't disagree with any of the comments, concerns that were made at the CPC and perhaps here today. But I guess there's a bigger question of why we're coming up with more money. And it really comes down to, the procedure of when this was awarded to us, the Housing Authority, and the other 2 requests. Perhaps not a better contingency plan, and project foresighting could have predicted and helped alleviate some of these requests. But I can go through kind of chronologically of how we got here today, if the board should choose to help understand the request.
Well, I wasn't here, so I'm a little interested.
Sure. So back in 2019, June of 2019 is when the Housing Authority entered into a license to enter and use real property. So that's when the Housing Authority took over kind of management. That's when we started paying the utilities, the insurance on the property, using our maintenance staff to just maintain it. It wasn't until May of '21 when we actually could then, the deed was signed over to the Housing Authority. That had to do with COVID and some of the things why it hung up. From that point, we did do an assessment and a cost comparatives to see how much this potentially would cost us to renovate. We also went out, we did an internal designer selection, and there was 2 architects that came forth, and R2 was our primary architect that won. So they were our lead designer and oversight on this project. So we went under contract with R2 in September of '21. The CPC, based on the initial estimates of the construction, awarded us back on town meeting of, the spring town meeting of '21, awarded us the initial award, $475,000. That was based off of the preliminary estimates and the original estimates back in '19 when we first were doing the studies. We went out to bid in November of '21. The file sub-bids exceeded the awarded amount, so we terminated the bid at that time. In the interim, we tried to value engineer the project to try to see where we could cut costs and perhaps get it closer to budget. We also chipped away at some of the projects since there was funding, so we added an ADA ramp. And the bigger project was, we knew we had to upgrade the water main. What we didn't know at the initial bid was, we thought we could just go with a kind of a retainage suppression system, but it was then told that we needed to then sprinkle the whole building and so forth. We had to then, we went in and replaced the water main for the fire suppression system, increased that to a 4-inch main. That was funded through ARPA funds from the town at $22,000. But as they were doing that work, the water main, it was, at the time, we were gonna try to use that same line and split, but we couldn't, we had to then dedicate the fire sprinkler main and the water main, and the water main at the time was also leaking, so that needed to be replaced. So the funding we got from that, the change order to replace that water main actually doubled. So we didn't receive all the funding we needed to complete that work. So that is kind of, goes into this part of this request for the 140, because we were shorted on that one a little bit. We went to rebid in April of '23. We did this prior to any additional funding award to see if we value engineered enough to bring the scope down. Those bids, the low construction bid came in at $856,000. And so that's when we went back to the CPC to see if we could get additional funding to take care of the new contract that we were proposing. The CPC granted us additional funds to offset those, that additional cost that we received. That was awarded in fall of '23's town meeting in the amount of $381,525. In addition, before we were rebid, we also were trying to reach out for grants and other things of that nature. We did receive a state grant for $150,000 as well to try to offset some of these costs. So we continued, we got the funding to then meet the need of the contract, so we started with the work. So the next project that really has me here today asking for this money is the sewer main. So, and that's what's gonna, excuse me, prevent us occupancy at the moment. So, part of the general bid was just to scope the existing sewer main. Just have a camera go down and make sure it's satisfied. And at the time, the permits went in and were received under that request. When they went for the plumbing permit, the town engineer requested that we verify if it's a 4 or 6 inch main. If it's a 4-inch main, then we'd have to increase to the 6-inch main. We couldn't verify that from building because everything was underground, so then they asked for us to excavate it. Upon excavation, they determined it was a 4-inch, so we had to increase everything to a 6-inch. So we had to bring the engineer back out to redesign that. And we were gonna go ahead with that work with the subcontractor, and as he exposed everything, it was determined that the pitch on the existing line was flat and didn't have the required pitch to meet code today. So by putting things in as they are, we would have to replumb the whole building that's already plumbed, and change, either put a pump-up system or something else. The engineer did decide, and now what we would go forward with on this revised PCO that we received, is later on down Oak Street, the main is pitched far enough that we could actually meet that and still be a gravity fed. But this has increased that change order significantly and has exceeded any authorized funding that we have to date. So between the water main and then the sewer main, we had some asbestos that was exposed during demolition on old ductwork that we needed to have abated. It's renovating a 100-year-old building. There's a lot of unforeseen things. And another issue of why there was a question at the CPC is, the cost per square foot. Why is it so elevated too? And everything that we have to bid out is, prevailing wage as well. So that does differ from, a private developer when that goes into effect. So unfortunately, we're in the position we're in. It comes down to, after meeting with David, it's a tricky one. I don't want to be up here. If I didn't have to be up here asking for money, I wouldn't be. The Housing Authority is a full subsidized agency, so what we do is merely a resource. We're not there for profit. We're not making profit off these rents. We don't have excess funds to then develop. What we do, we're not developers. We maintain, and we get subsidy to maintain our facilities. So it's a great venture. We need more subsidized housing. Again, it's our focus is our local elderly, veteran, and disabled, and it's kind of our most impacted in this housing market that we're in. These are the clientele that cannot afford the affordable housing that is being developed. So it really helps those most in need. So I appreciate the consideration, but again, we won't be able to, we won't be able to get occupancy without kind of immediate funds to take care of this.
I just have to ask you, in this, because I don't know, how much is invested in this project to this point without the 140?
So total awarded funding to this point is $1,028,896. So that's with the state grant, plus the ARPA award for the water main, plus the 2 awards from the
That's
CPC.
everything, 100%?
100%, that's what we've received in funding, yes. Well, not received, but awarded,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna get 3 units out of that.
correct.
So my question to you is, if you just went off the street and was to build 3 units, it probably would have been a lot cheaper. I'm just guessing.
Yep.
I'm not in the building business.
Yes,
And I don't mean you personally. I
right,
don't
in
know,
general,
I'm
yes,
just-
yes, I agree.
So, moving forward, the town needs to be awful considerate of, trying to refurbish buildings.
Yep.
We're not gonna go into that tonight, because we'll be here till tomorrow. But, and this is what happens, it's the unknowns. And,
Right.
well, the intent is good, it's a very expensive venture.
Yep.
So while you are here, and I'm going to turn it over to the vice chairman, I know he has some questions or comments, but I do have to ask you, with this present board that we have here and have had the last couple of years, we're looking out 5, 10 years. We'd like to know what your plans are. The last project that we did, and John probably knows the date, was with Joni Pimentel, and we added on those units, well, right where your office is.
Cherry Hill, yep.
And I haven't really seen anything to that magnitude. So is there anything on the plan? And the second thing, I will turn it over, is if you have a card or some contact info, because I had called Mr. Shirley,
Okay.
and I did not receive a call back. A resident actually had applied there and had some questions and made the list, and, you know, I said, we have nothing to do with that, but
Yep.
I'd be more than happy to ask, and,
Perfect.
you know, so I directed him to call there. I don't know if he got his answers, but I'll check with him.
Okay, yeah,
But I mean, we'd have to have a little more open communication, other than when it's, you know, for the money, and I've never met you, and
Yep.
I'm not blaming you, but, you know, this, I don't know if we need to get a clerk of the works there, or, you know what I'm saying, John? And I mean that, because like when we did the parking deck, and we have projects like this one here that we're sitting in, we call it the clerk of the works, and get your bids, and, because the asbestos and all that stuff would have been picked up, and it really makes me wonder how a sewer main for an elementary school with 3 classrooms, 4 classrooms is sufficient, but yet it's not efficient for 3 apartments. So it's a little,
I had the
you
same
know,
question.
it's a little amazing. When I was listening to you say that, it's like, okay. And I realize the codes may have changed, but the building's been there longer than we all have been, that's for
Right.
sure, I think. Right? Yeah, I'm the oldest one here, so. All right. Oh, Charlie. So, Mr. Canty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, good to see you, long time.
Yes.
Candidly, I wish we were in better circumstances,
I
but
agree.
nevertheless, here we are. So I'm looking at the report and recommendations book from the last time this was submitted to town meeting. So you submitted, in part of that application in the backup materials, a memorandum that outlined the costs, listed as page 179 of that book from the fall annual town meeting of 2023. And I just want to go over the costs at that time. So it was, you had, in terms of already authorized spending, you had CPA in the amount of $475. You had a state grant of $150,000, and you had town ARPA funds already in hand for $22,371, right?
Correct.
So that, at that time, you had $647,371 in authorized spending. You were aware of issues that were coming up and other things you had to do, so that's why you looked for $381,525 from the fall town meeting of last year. And that was a significant amount of money, significant amount of cost per unit at this time. And now you're here looking for 140. I guess, like, candidly, I've since the beginning thought this was a historical preservation project masquerading as an affordable housing project. I think the exorbitant cost per unit has borne that out, that putting affordable housing within historic structures is not the way to go.
Yeah.
But I find it difficult to understand how it got to this place. I know you explained it earlier. I would be very surprised if there's anything you could say that could make me vote yes for this, to be honest, Chris. But in the event that we were to get this funding, what kind of assurance could there be that you're not going to be back here, or someone else isn't going to be back here a 4th time,
Yeah.
looking for more money?
I would say 5th.
Well, let's go 4th for now, and it's enough money and it's enough times that, yeah, right? So I guess what kind of assurance that this is the last bit of funding that you would ever need?
Yeah, it will be my last time up here presenting more funding for this project, for sure. The general contractor is pretty much done. I've sat down with them, I sat down with any of the subcontractors, and I presented that I will be at these meetings asking for the remainder of this money. Can you make sure I am reassured there is no other extended cost so I can account for them in these meetings? And after I submitted that letter, another bill did come in, but from this point on, there is no other item that could come up that would bring me to this table, that we could not finish within the housing authority. The biggest ticket item left to be done is that sewer main, and it's been engineered to work, and they have said that's what it will cost to finish that portion. So no other big ticket item. The units are pretty much complete. They just need final cleaning. The HVAC is hooked up. We're working with the water department to switch out the meter to get the water running, and then it literally just needs the sewer hookup to then be operational. We're tying up the fire alarm system, and so it is weeks away from being occupiable.
Okay. So you mentioned a bill that already came, is that rolled into this, or did the contractor eat those costs, or what happened with that late submission?
So in that 140, there was some contingency planning in hopes to offset some of
Okay.
foreseen costs.
So just so we're clear, like, this would bring the total, if more money were put on in this amount of 140, that would bring the total project cost to $1,168,000 and some change?
Yep.
Which would bring the total cost per unit to over $389,000 per unit? That's very pricey.
Extreme.
Yes,
Yes.
I mean, if back in 2019, we could have bought a single-family home, 3 single-family homes for that amount of money. Now, they'd be much smaller homes,
Yeah.
but we could still buy them. But they'd be bigger than these units.
Yes,
Yes.
I don't disagree.
All right, I have no further questions. I will hold other remarks for discussion.
Mr. Mahoney.
All right, Chris, so a couple of Wednesdays, just going over a couple of things that we talked about last Thursday at the CPC meeting. So I went out for a walk a couple of Wednesdays ago, heading north on Court Street, and had an epiphany and realized that your office was to my left. So I crossed the street and came over and knocked on your door. And that was probably about 9:30 that morning. We met for the first time. We had a 5 or 10-minute meeting in your office. And I left with the understanding that the project would be completed within a couple of weeks. Individuals would be moving in 4 to 8 weeks, and that there would be outstanding invoices for $90,000 to $100,000. And I left with that, and I believe the next day, I communicated that to Mr. Peck and the finance director, because I was sitting in a row with them at the welcoming ceremony in the 1820 for the Japanese delegation. And I had asked you when the communication to the town manager and the board would be, and you said that was coming. You were crafting an email, and I believe that came 48 hours later, and that was that Friday afternoon. And what the 2 significant variables that changed in the email was that all of a sudden the project would not be completed. The project would stop, and then the outstanding value of the work needed to be done was $140,000. So I know you told the Community Preservation Committee Thursday night what happened in that 48 hours, but could you just reinforce that for the board now?
Sure. Yeah, as I mentioned there in that meeting, I apologize for misspeaking at that time, potentially caught off guard and not prepared for a meeting. At that meeting that we had, that was the information that I had.
Right.
And the construction has still continued. So we have not halted construction. So I guess in that moment, in that conversation, at that time, the construction has not been halted. I also didn't believe that we would be unable to obtain an occupancy permit until I reached out to the other vendors and contractors. So from that meeting, that impromptu meeting to the 48-hour letter, I wanted, so I wouldn't be up here embarrassed asking for 90 and needing 140 and having to come back. I made sure I did my due diligence, talk to the contractors and get the correct figure. So then I could then make an appropriate request that would finish this project and get people housed. So.
Okay, yep, that's satisfactory to me. So having said that, if this board is going to provide relief, the relief needs to come in October and not in April of '25. Because if the relief comes in April of '25, that means that that building is going to sit idle for 10 months, and that's not a positive. So obviously, the significant mistake strategically on this project was there was an assumption at the beginning that there didn't need to be oversight from the town, specifically our building committee, because the assumption was it was the housing authority, and they knew how to do these things.
Right.
And that backfired. So whether it's the third or fourth or fifth request, I have a contingency on any future support for this $140. If it is truly $140,000, is that I need town eyes on this last. It's a case study. So win, lose, or draw, we need to evaluate what occurred here, identify what went wrong, and we're supposed to make note of that and not repeat those mistakes in the future. So that's why I asked Mr. Peck if he was going to be able to stay in here, and I appreciate you taking your time to meet with him. So the building committee, and I don't know how many projects it is, but so far they're perfect. So every project that they've overseen has come in on budget or under budget. Now eventually that flawless streak is going to come to an end sometime, but it'll probably be some extraordinary variable that was unforeseen by anyone. So I just, there's there's like almost a 20 or 25-day timeline here that if the relief is going to happen in October, we can facilitate that. But I need Mr. Peck to be accommodated in his committee with respect to materials and data to what has occurred to date, what is remaining, and if they need to get their boots on the ground and get in that building and look around. I just want all of that facilitated. And then, of course, the relevant department heads, paid town staff that weighs in on this too, so that now I have town staff giving us, in conjunction with a pretty solid performing building committee, a reasonable assumption that there won't be another ask, and that we can finally put this to bed and move on. And last question. Are you telling me that all 3 units are going to be occupied by senior disabled veterans?
That is, yes,
All 3 of them?
yes.
Native Plymouthians?
So,
Or current Plymouth residents?
right, so the way the voucher, it's a voucher subsidized unit, and the board has adopted priorities for that, so local being a preference, elderly, disabled, and veterans all being a preference. So 100% it would be local, and then, yeah, it depends on the other priorities, who's on the list, but they would meet up with one of those criteria. They are all 1-bedroom units, so a family's not going into these. So it would be a single or a couple, and it's specifically for your elderly, a veteran, a disabled.
Okay, Chris, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, I'll give you a spoiler alert. I'm skeptical of this, as are my colleagues, obviously. But I want to caveat it up front and say I want to thank you for the work that you do at the Housing Authority. You do yeoman's work, and you absolutely serve the community in a significant way. So none of what I'm going to ask and none of what I'm going to say is a criticism of you or your operation. I think for me, my criticism overall is of public or semi-public organizations trying to do affordable housing projects when the private sector can do it for a lot cheaper. So my first question, I'm going to bring back to Mr. Canty brought up the fall '23 town meeting. The tables that you folks provided in your request for the additional $381,525. Table B represents completed projects, and the sum total of those projects was $135,196. Where did that money come from?
Out of the original CPC award, that 475,000.
I'm more confused now than I was when I walked into this meeting, because if you go down, that means you're double counting that money then under authorized Table A down below. So I am having a hard time following the total cost of this project overall.
Sure.
And I, like my colleagues, I'm not certain that this $140,000 is going to get us over the line.
Yep.
And if we do fund this, it feels like we are going down a path that we've seen before. It would be surprising to me if this was the final ask. So that $135,196, assuming that it was a part of that 475, so does that mean that the Housing Authority went forward with work not knowing if they'd be funded for the remainder of the project?
So right on the pre-work, yes. So the initial, once we received the initial award, we were able to then submit a request for the initial funding. So we received the funding of $166,251. And with that funding, we decided to move forward with smaller projects to help, I guess, bring the building up, enhance the building, because the part of the agreement was if we are not able to fund or complete this project, it would be sold back to the town for $1, because that's what we bought the building for. So we would sell it back to $1 if we could not fulfill our project. So we pulled out smaller projects that would help future development and also help the building. If we were to sell it back to the town, it was only going to be projects that would need to be done anyways to that building. So that's why the water main, the sprinkler, was taken care of, the ADA ramp, and some of the site prep to get us ready. So we went forward with those smaller projects prior to, but yes, we did not start the main project, the bidded project, prior to.
So if this $140,000 isn't awarded, can I take what you've said to mean that the town will take the building back and will give you $1 for it?
In the agreement, that could happen, yes.
So the town will
If
end
they
up,
so choose, we could then give it back for $1.
can I ask Lynn Barrett to come up?
I be-
Because she's shaking her head. She did it to herself, folks. Is that correct?
Sorry.
What was your question, David?
Is it correct that we would buy the building back for $1?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look at the agreement. I
Okay.
know that I sent it to the town manager. I found it in the folders, the archive folders, that we did sell it to them for $1. I was just shaking my head because I didn't
I
want
think you share the
another
same
building.
concern that I do. I don't think the town wants to own a historical building, as Mr. Canty has pointed out, masquerading as an affordable housing project. We've got one of those down in Manamet that I think has been troublesome for the town, and I don't think I need to name it in this conversation, but I see that that's the direction that we're going in. Thank you, Lynn. My final question is that you mentioned, Chris, that the Housing Authority is a fully subsidized organization.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about where those subsidies come from?
Sure. Subsidies, so we have 3 different facets to our portfolio. The subsidies are federal and state, And federally, we have, here in Plymouth, we have two public housing, federal public housing, that's our High Cliff and Northfield sites, Prince Street and Nix Rock Road. So that funding is federally funded elderly and disabled housing. Fully subsidized, meaning the tenants pay a percentage of their income, a fixed percentage of their income. Whatever they have, that's what we would receive. Everything else, the salaries of the employees, the capital plans, everything else is fully subsidized. We have to create budgets. We have 5-year timelines. We sit down with accounting. Our books need to pretty much zero out. They offset, they make the revisions. So that's our federal public housing, elderly and disabled, High Cliff and Northfield. We also have state public housing. That would be our Cherry Hill site on Court Street. We have Southfield over on South Street. We have Castle Court right behind High Cliff. Those are our 3 elderly disabled sites. Again, fully subsidized. The tenants pay a percentage of their income, and everything else on those sites and our salaries are subsidized by the state. And then we have single-family homes. We have 5 of them, most of them, 4 of them in West Plymouth, 1 of them in Manamet, same thing. And then we have a group home in Plymouth that is on 32 South Pond Road next to the Dunkin' Donuts. And that is a building of the housing authorities that we maintain, but we lease it out to a provider, VinFen being the provider in this case, and they put their client base. So that's more of your deeper needed community members, that more transitional housing or people that need assistance in that form. So all of our housing, everything that we do is on it's a nonprofit kind of basis. It's fully subsidized in what we do, and we have to submit capital plans. So projects like these we don't develop. The state and federal government has not. Joan was the last one to develop public housing. And so the federal and state government has not subsidized or has not funded subsidized housing development. And so merely our capital plans are strictly maintaining our facilities and doing those projects to those facilities. So we haven't developed new subsidized housing in quite some time.
Thank you. So I would say that most of the funding for the housing authority comes through the taxpayer, whether it be at the federal or the state level.
Correct.
Thank you. Folks, I'm skeptical of this. I think it's high time we really take a look at whether or not we need to be doing true public-private partnerships. I mean, we just, at our last town meeting, passed an article for 62 units at about $64,000 per unit, and this is costing us nearly $400,000. So I have a real problem with this request. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I have one final question, but it would be for the town manager. This request is to get it funded for October, Derek. Would we need to reopen the warrant in order to do that?
Yeah, so we have multiple options here. 2 of the 3 options would require town meeting action. So to your question, yeah, the board would have to reopen the warrant at its next meeting, which would be September 10th, for a period for, I would recommend at least 4 or 5 days. Accept this as a request, and then it would be placed for article review at the September 17th meeting. There are 2 sources of funding that I'm aware of, certainly CPC, which we all know, and there's an additional source of funding that could be used for affordable housing as well. Ms. Barrett could speak to that account specifically, but both of those 2 sources of funding require town meeting action. The other alternative, although very limited, dollars remain as an ARPA, which would not require town meeting action, as you know.
Thank you. If we do reopen the warrant, other petitioners could come through, yes?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman? Hi, Chris, thank you for your presentation. About 3 or 4 years ago, when I was running for Select Board, I met with Russ Shirley to tour the site down there, and we walked through the building, and And he was excited, and I was too. It was gonna be, I believe there was 4 units at the time, affordable housing for our seniors or for handicap and veterans, and it was something that we really needed. And we talked about the funding, and we were outside, he was showing me where the handicap ramp was gonna be, and that was gonna be a very expensive, that was a 6-figure, and he told me he was gonna work with the schools and have the vocational program actually build that ramp. Is that who did they do that?
No, we tried,
So,
and we weren't
Okay,
able to.
so that didn't happen, and so there was a lot of money given out, and the project, it's been taking a long time, let's put it that way. I'd drive by it, I'd watch it, nothing was happening. The last time they came before us, I forget when it was, but they came before us for a few $100,000. And my colleagues on the board, some of them were against this. And my comments were, we've come this far, it's something we need. You know, we've already invested so much money in this. Let's get this to the finish line. And 300 and some, that was a lot of money. But when I saw this on the agenda, I said, my feeling was, here we go again. And I have a hard time justifying giving more money. I really do. It's, you know, we're talking about the sewer main. Shouldn't it have been done a long time ago? I don't know why is that in the end? I would think that should be an early part of the project. Isn't that all part of the plumbing? And I mean, I'm not a builder, I don't pretend to be, David, I'm not you, or a facilities guy, but it seems like this has gone a little backwards. And again, I'm not being critical, I know you're coming in on this, but it's, I don't want to say the word mismanaged, because I know there's been a lot of volunteers involved in this too, but this is a problem for me, giving more money. It really is, so it's disappointing. We're being put in a tough position, because if we don't fund this may not get done, and then that building may sit empty, and I don't want to see that, so, anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
John?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could get David Peck up there for a minute. So David, so I think you heard the timeline outlined by the town manager. Potentially is a scenario where we could vote to open the docket or the warrant on the 10th and close it on the 17th. Can you just, does the building committee have a meeting before the 17th of September?
We do. We have the 12th. I won't be there, but the committee, you know, we have a lot of competent people on the committee.
Okay, so can you just, can you give a quick synopsis of what occurred in the meeting that you had today for an hour? And can you go into, in detail? So I believe you guys have hit like a slow period in your workload because some projects are coming off the books and going into completion, and you're on the verge of maybe picking 1 or 2 up, but you have the ability to review something. So what do you look at, and how would you review what has gone on here?
If I could restate it, just, you know, when I heard this was on the agenda tonight, I actually contacted a couple other building committee members to be able to sit in on an informal basis, because I knew we wouldn't have time to have an official full committee to review it, but I wanted to listen and support, add just as one member of the building committee, observations twofold. One about the process that got us here, but more important, make sure it doesn't happen again. You know, and frankly, there were multiple, I consider dropping the ball, because, as Chris said, they aren't used to developing buildings. And so, starting at the very beginning, I'll just kind of touch base. They selected the architect without going to, like, designer selection. They had an independent process of selecting. They did an initial estimate of $400,000 to $500,000 for the project. and that's what they asked for. And we know sometimes estimates can be off, but that's where they got the 475 to begin with, and that was 21. Then they tried to value engineer and got some ARPA funds, did the small projects, and then they rebid, as you heard, in April 23. So I said, by the way, did you get an updated estimate before that, just to see what, and they said no. Now, every one of our town projects, you do more than one estimate. Sometimes you do two and you reconcile them. They didn't do the estimate. They believe they have a good contractor and the work that's in place is well done. But I said, did you have an OPM, owner's project manager? And they said, no. And I said, again, I'm just saying, the town projects, we always make sure, even if it's not a full-time clerk of the works or OPM, but you have a professional. They said, well, we thought the architect would keep an eye on things, or some of our volunteers. So, and then I believe a major issue at both the early stages and then our current one, they didn't put enough contingency and escalation on it. They basically took the bid that they got and looked at their remaining money, or the money they already had in the checkbook, and asked for the difference. They added no contingency, no escalation. And if you take that $856,000, which is what the project cost, and add 20%, it's an old building, add escalation, that's $180,000. They wouldn't be here asking if they had properly asked for the amount of money an old project needed. So both the initial ask and then certainly the ask in 23, they underestimated what they needed for the project. Every one of these steps is where the building committee could have helped, or an owner's project manager. They were flying on their own, and it's coming back to reflect things. And then, it's sometimes from the town meeting member thing, as other projects, if the full cost of a project were properly estimated and presented to town meeting, then town meeting might turn it down. I certainly would think for 3 units and $1.1 million or $1.2 million, if that had been presented in 2019 or 2021 or even 2023, people would have said, we need affordable housing, but that's too much. But by this sort of, bait and switch is wrong, but the sort of incremental underestimating to get to approval just becomes, that's part of the problem here. I just think it was, I won't criticize the design. I haven't walked around and looked at it, but basically, we've not had full disclosure throughout the project about what this project truly costs. Just as an aside on the costs, I think by updating the infrastructure, water lines and basically a major sewer, the cost of that spread over just 3 units makes the overall unit costs that much more expensive. That kind of infrastructure you'd put in an apartment building with 10 or 20 units, but they basically, it's kind of, a Cadillac infrastructure for really only a Chevrolet need, if I can use that. It really is, so there were a variety of just, I'd say, poor decisions throughout the life of the project, and I am hoping that doesn't happen again, and Chris promised, Chris and Greg, his partner, going forward when there's projects like this, they will involve the building committee throughout, but particularly with estimate presentation, because this town has a long history, a periodic history of presenting low costs to get to yes, and then all of a sudden coming back.
All right, so 2 more things, and obviously, the Community Preservation Committee, anything similar to this in the future comes up, your committee has to be involved from the get-go. And then the second thing is anticipating a potential discussion of this board on Tuesday, the 17th of September. Does that give your committee enough time to weigh in and properly vet the $140,000 and say to us with reasonable assurance that this will put this to bed forever.
I will pledge for them, they'll take a look at it, but, most of the cost of the project's already in place. I mean, you're down to 2 or 3 more elements to put in. Some of the smaller ones, updating a fire alarm panel, a couple $1,000s, a little bit, it probably is less than 5 items, or, that the committee could look at, they could walk around, but we can't take out installed stuff. So I personally also lobby, I think like Charlie said, let's find a way to finish it. Take the lessons from it, don't let it happen again, but we shouldn't leave it empty. Those 3 families that could move in the near future. So I would hope, working with the Director of Finance, and you guys could find it. And if it needs to go to town meeting, so be it. I'll ask my group to put it on the agenda and talk it through and visit the property, but I'd work with Chris and his team just to see exactly what are the outstanding items, because again, if they put in Cadillac finishes and they put in, high-level thing, we're not going to rip them out and get a credit. It is what it is. The horse or the herd of horses is out the barn door, but let's finish it and not let it sit even a month or 2, ideally, or certainly don't want to wait 6 months. So those are my few observations. I want to thank them for short notice spending an hour with me.
And I want to thank you, and you already answered my last question, which, would you recommend leaving it vacant? That's what I was going to ask.
I do not recommend leaving it vacant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Glad to help.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess the takeaway here is if we do empty some elementary schools like Hedge and Cold Spring, let's not try to convert them. Would you say that's fair? I think so. At least not without a clerk of the works. And the building committee, excuse me. Okay, wish of the board?
Put this on as an agenda item for Tuesday, September 17th, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Well,
Mr. Canty.
for what purpose?
For the potential sponsoring of an article for October town meeting.
That's far too late. So you'd have to, what he said earlier was that we'd
Right.
have to open the warrant on the 10th, close it on the 17th, right? So I'm personally will speak vehemently against opening the warrant for this purpose, but procedurally, you'd have to make a motion to open the warrant to do what you're, so that it could be submitted. But I will hold further comments until such motion is made and seconded, if it is.
So, Mr. Canty, you're looking for a motion. You want somebody to make a motion to have this as an agenda item on the 10th?
I very much do not, but if you would like to, if you would like to see that happen, that's what, in order to, you'd need to make a motion to open the warrant on the 10th and close it on the 17th, and then have the item on the 17th. Because if you wait to the 17th, I mean, town meeting is a firm date.
Correct.
And those hearings that FinCom's having, those are all happening in live, already started. So if you want this added to the warrant, what I'm saying is you'd need to make a motion to do so, to reopen the warrant at this point. Or on the 10th, but you can't wait till the 17th.
I would wait until there's input from the building committee, and there's a reasonable expectation that this is gonna finish it. I don't believe that if an article were to be sponsored on the 17th, that would completely collapse an October town meeting, and the individuals who participate wouldn't be able to wrap their arms around, such an article and get it through. I need more data. I want our side to weigh in on what's going on here and what has occurred.
Well, right, but time is not our friend. Time marches on despite your desire for more data.
I agree with that, Mr. Canty, but I think there are times when, I don't look at this as particularly a large item that is that confusing. Unless we know right now that we're not going to finish the project, there's a firm majority that is saying, we're not going to complete this, we won't make this contribution, and the housing authority can either take their Oak Street school and go finish it on their own, or relinquish the building to the community. But I don't know that yet. I'm not definitive one way or the other. But I look at the chair as the individual that sets the agenda, and past practice has been, I don't remember too many formal votes being had for an individual to get an agenda item on. And we can put an agenda item on beginning on the 10th, and we can have a subsequent discussion that doesn't lead to an affirmative vote opening up the warrant.
But
Talk to me, Kevin.
the warrant's already closed right now. There's already hearings happening, there's a schedule of hearings happening. Town meeting has a firm deadline, the caucuses have a firm deadline, so if your desire is to put it on the warrant, I think you have to act now. I just don't think we can't wait 2 more weeks. Because you're gonna backlog that whole process that frankly, that's putting a lot on the FinCom, that's putting a lot on, it's only one article, but you don't know that that's the only article that's gonna come in during that 5-day window that the warrant is open. You could have 10 petitioned articles waiting in the wing come in, and then the whole schedule is up on its end.
Agreed.
Mr. Chairman. Is it possible to ask another question of Chris? Would you come up here, please? Chris, if you get the funding, do you have people ready to go for these units?
Yes.
How long will it take you to finish this project?
The contractor said they'll be done in approximately 3 weeks.
How long before you can get that occupied?
I'd say give another month after that we'd be doing the work now we have the waiting list already done, so.
Yeah, Plymouth residents?
Correct. So it's just a matter of doing their formality, which would probably take a month.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to open the warrant for this article on September 10th for a 5-day period, because I don't want this building to sit empty like we have down in Manamet, a $4 million building that's empty, and it's been empty for years. If we have people ready to go, we get 3 affordable housing, okay, maybe it costs us a little bit too much, some mistakes were made, but that's 3 affordable units that are gonna be filled with handicapped, veterans, seniors, or all 3 of the above. So I'd like to at least vote on this.
Mr. Bletzer, what was your motion again?
Yep, for a 5-day.
So you're suggesting there's an agenda item on the 10th of September to vote at that point in time to potentially
Yeah,
open it
excuse me,
for a
then
week.
we'll vote then, yes.
Just so I could clarify procedurally, I think the discussion is amongst the board members of whether or not you're asking the chairman to place an agenda item on the 10th to open the warrant and then close the warrant. There's no motion to be made. This is more of a discussion. There's nothing listed on the agenda that would allow for you to make a legal motion at this time.
So I'm back.
How about if I made a motion to approve this funding?
No. So,
It's on the agenda, why can't I make a motion on this?
well, but so you can make a motion that you couldn't be anticipated by the chair within 48 hours under the open meeting law without violating the open meeting law. But there's a lot of, I guess, technically, if the chair couldn't have reasonably anticipated that you would do that within 48 hours, I guess you could. I don't think it would be a great idea. But there's just so many unanswered questions about where that funding would come. The only place it could come from without town meeting action is ARPA funds. So you'd be making a motion for ARPA funds specifically. And we don't have we haven't heard any information about other uses for ARPA funds, the current balance as it stands right now on ARPA funds. So, I mean, that would be potentially going into undiscovered country in that regard.
So the CPC money, that's not in play here because we,
Well, they'd have to apply to CPC, and then the CPC would have to vote on that, and then then they'd have to add that to the warrant while it's open.
where's your,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So Charlie,
yep,
in theory, you could use Community Preservation Act money, but they would have to apply, fill out an application, apply to that committee. That committee would have to have a meeting and vote in the affirmative to sponsor that article, okay? The other two buckets of money are, under control of the finance director, there's a bucket of money from the short-term rental or Airbnb tax. 35% of that goes into a separate account specifically for infrastructure to construct affordable housing. That fund has $110,000 in it.
Yeah.
So, following up on what Mr. Canty said, you could go with all ARPA money, even though we've heard nothing tonight that outlines how much balance we have left or any of that is already earmarked for something. Or you could go $30,000 for ARPA money, and then, which doesn't need to go to town meeting, in a separate article for 110 from that specific account that I just referenced.
so what confused me is I'm reading Dear CPC, so that they haven't gone before CPC. That's what's
They
confusing.
they haven't applied for an article of community preservation, but they went in there last Thursday to give an update on this project. It's just a smaller version of what we just heard. We had full 9 for 9, all 9 members were there, and Chris came in, and it was a shorter conversation than what we're currently having.
So the purpose tonight, before us, them coming before us tonight,
I would say that Chris came in to update us on the current status and to initiate a discussion on potential relief for the current situation.
Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mahoney, is it accurate to say that there was no action taken by the CPC during that meeting?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Canty?
So, I would just like to stress that if we reopen the warrant for this on the 10th or any other day, anything else could come through the door while it's open. And that could really have a cascade effect on the rest of the system, including like the FinCom that already has their schedule laid out, including the caucuses and all of that stuff. And I think there are a lot of unknowns as to how that aspect would play out. I am 100% confident that I am not going to put more money in this project for it in its current design. I understand that having it occupied with people that are in need would be a good thing, but we've talked during this presentation, during this discussion about how we don't want to see this happen again. If you continue to reward, and I don't mean this as a criticism of Chris. I think Chris and his organization does great work. I think the idea behind the project of putting affordable housing in that wasn't necessarily a bad thought, but I did notice from the beginning that it was very expensive, and that was when it cost a lot less than this. And now it's not even throwing good money after bad, it's throwing bad money after bad money after bad money. This is like a project that is fueled by cash, and it's just burning through it. $389,000 plus per unit is extremely expensive. And as Mr. Peck outlined, by not putting the total cost in, they're trying to draw you into a sunk cost fallacy that, oh, well, we've already put so much in, we don't want to lose that money, so we'll put more money in there and we'll get it occupied and we'll get it funded. I would rather do something like the town buys it back for $1, sells it to a private developer for $1 that would be willing to complete the affordable housing project work and do that. That's the kind of thing I could see getting this over the threshold. That would only cost us another $1. But putting all the money we've already put in, plus 140 more, plus whatever other more is gonna come through in the future, I'm also skeptical that this is the last bit of money that's gonna come through. I can't personally, despite the fact that we need affordable housing desperately in this community, that doesn't mean we need any kind of affordable housing that comes our way. We should still be vetting projects individually. And I think this has been a project with a lot of questions and a lot of problems from the beginning. And as it has gone on, the problems and questions have only increased for me, not decreased. So those are my thoughts on both opening the warrant as well as the substance of the material before us.
Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with Mr. Canty wholeheartedly. In order for affordable housing to work, it needs to be affordable for the taxpayers who fund the projects as well, and this is just not it.
Well, did you withdraw your motion, Mr. Butler? I'm only asking because, okay.
Listen, I was dead against this coming in. I didn't want to spend any more money on this project, but we're 90% completed. You know, we're just about completed. So you're going to give it to a developer for the 10% finish to profit off of this? That doesn't make sense to me. Believe me, I don't like the mistakes that were made. I don't like, we built this town hall in half the time it's taken this project, a $38 million project. So I'm just torn. I just don't want to see this Oak Street building empty like I've seen at Symes House. It's just, and that's a complete waste of money. So whatever we can do to make this happen, I want to try and make it happen. So.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, we don't meet next week because of the primary and the holiday weekend. We meet 14 days from now, and it's still, I defer to you as the chair of the board. I still think that this discussion can be continued, and it warrants an agenda item on Tuesday, September 10th.
And there's nothing binding us to have a Tuesday meeting. I mean, if it's the will of the majority of the board, I can call a meeting on a Wednesday, a Tuesday, a Friday. It can be Zoom, it can, So don't let that be in the way of anything you might be thinking, if that's what the board, the majority's thinking. I mean, I'll always do that, I've always done that. So, try to make timelines. I guess it's very easy to say I wasn't here, but I wasn't for it, and the bottom line is, we need $140,000 to finish this project. When I say we, the town. Give it to a developer for $1, that's not making the taxpayers feel any better. When you're giving away a $1 million plus for $1, that's not, And I do have to say, you were on the FinCom, I think, for some of this.
I voted against it.
Yeah. Did you? Okay. But, it is where it is, and we've been on this for quite a while. I do support finishing the project. How we get to the finish line, there's a lot of debate, and that's if it does. There's a couple members that don't, and rightfully so, but I see it at this point, 140, I'd like to see it finished. And we did ask Mr. Packer, he mentioned that not to leave the building empty, and we all know, because then if you do that and certain critters and stuff get in there and prices escalate more, then it's going to be $240,000. So we cut the losses, and I hope we all learn by this. And, I can tell you, I'll never vote John, I know you want a new elementary school or two, but no more remodeling schools as much as, not for the town anyway, so.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Golden.
could I make a suggestion that we call a meeting for Wednesday, September 4th, to discuss this?
Absolutely. I don't need a motion, I can call that meeting, so.
And
I'll
through-
just put it in my notes here.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, just a request for the finance director or the town manager to provide us with a current update of opera.
Yes, John? So it looks like we'll have a quick meeting on the 4th, hopefully. Mr. Canty?
If we do have it on the 4th, I have to present to the FinCom that night on Land Bank, so if we could do it as early, like somewhere between 5 and 7, that would be excellent, unless a better time works for other people. That was one point. Number two, when I said I'd like to see a developer take it for $1, that was on the idea that that would cost the taxpayers $1 and save them $139,999 to see the same outcome of affordable housing created in that scenario. Because if a developer, the problem with developers of making affordable housing is obviously the cost of them, but if they're getting the land and the building for so cheap, then they could still make a go of it. So I don't want to just give it away to somebody just to give it away, but I'd rather save the taxpayer as much money as we can and still effectuate as much of the original goal as possible. I think that would be better overall than personally, just for myself, personally, than putting another $140,000 in versus just the $1. But reasonable minds could differ. That's just my 2 cents and a more complete explanation of my position.
Mr. Blitzer?
And that's why we have 5 votes, so.
All right, so, it looks like we're gonna go for the Wednesday, the 4th, right? And earlier can be, yeah, we can do that, right? Okay, gentlemen? And hopefully you can get some more answers and about the money and all that jazz, John? Yes. I know Lynn's here, but let's figure it out and get the APA number and see where it goes. Okay. So let me just write this down. Well, let's just move right on. Seaside Grace Trail presentation. All right, this is going to be the 4th. Let me just ask David. David, on Wednesday, can you meet with them? Wednesday, 4, so the staff can, okay. 4. Good evening, welcome.
Hi there.
Hi.
You want me to go? Oh, hi. My name is Ann Jolis, and I'm the creator of Grace Trail. Thank you for having me here tonight, and thank you everyone who came to listen. That was quite a discussion to follow. I feel like we should all get up and walk the Grace Trail here. Yeah. Woo! Okay, so here we go. So I'm here with the Plymouth Grace Trail Enhancement Proposal for the Seaside Trail. How do I make this go forward? With the red? Okay. Okay. Oh, there we go. Oh, go backwards. Go backwards. Okay. So I think I need to start with what is Grace Trail? And so Grace Trail is a 5-step process that begins with gratitude and it ends with hope. The purpose of Grace Trail is to improve the emotional well-being and counter the daily stresses through a conversation of hope and possibility. This is important now more than ever because of the challenges facing us all. You see it in the schools, you see it in our community, our homes, our businesses. We are all facing unbelievable challenges. Grace Trail gives access to a self-guided process of building resilience, accessing hope, while connecting in nature with yourself and others. GRACE. It's an acronym for these 5 words: gratitude, release, accept, challenge, and embrace. And the 5 words have 5 questions that accompany them. Gratitude, what are you grateful for? Release, what do you need to release or let go of to move forward in your life? Accept, what's calling out for acceptance in your life? Challenge, how would you like to challenge yourself to move forward in life? And embrace, what can you embrace as possible in your life? Oops. How did Grace Trail happen? In 2000, I found myself struggling with some really serious personal issues. Both my parents had passed away within 6 months of each other. I had 2 very creative and challenging teens You all know who those are if you have children. And I was changing my profession at that time, and I lost my balance in life. I just lost my breath. I found myself in my kitchen in a state of despair, saying I needed to step into a state of grace. And I don't talk like that, but I just felt like there was the calm in the middle of the storm was over there, and I couldn't get there. Later on that day, I saw 5 words in the word grace, and that was the gratitude, release, accept, challenge, and embrace. And I started asking those questions throughout the day, and I started to feel better. Started calling my husband at work, which I absolutely do not recommend. And I said, just listen while I ask these 5 questions. And every time I did it, he said yes. And he listened for 2 minutes, and I went on with my day feeling better. He came home one night, and he said to me, let's just do grace together. We walked around the block every night for an entire summer asking and answering those questions, and every time we did it, we felt better. Fast forward to 2012, my son is in Afghanistan in combat, and he did make it home, and I found myself faltering again. And I read an article about the Appalachian Mountain Trail, and in the article, the question was asked, who's hiking the trail? And the answer was, it's a whole lot of veterans walking off their war. I said, really? Where do I go to walk off my war? I can't get to the Appalachian Mountain Trail. I can't get to the Pacific Trail. So I decided to make a trail right in Plymouth. We had just moved to Plymouth, 2012, and I decided to make a grace trail along the Seaside Trail, and I picked up some big ocean stones, and I wrote gratitude. What are you grateful for? I wrote all 5 of the questions. I put them along the trail, over the side, and along the trail, a mile-long loop. I put up a couple maps, and they're still there today. I've been monitoring and loving this trail for 12 years, putting down the stones, putting down inspirational stones every day with an amazing response. I thought I'd be the only one walking it. I'm not. Thousands of people have come and walked the Grace Trail. We have some wonderful Grace Trail supporters here. People come from out of town. I walk out my door and I walk the trail. I meet wedding parties, grieving parties, recovery parties, family reunions. People have gotten married on the Grace Trail. They accept proposals on the Grace Trail, renew their vows at the acceptance stone. This Grace Trail is alive and well and well loved. So that is the story of the Grace Trail. And so today, what I'm proposing and hoping will happen is that I'd like to enhance the popular Grace Trail, which is appreciated by so many locals and so many visitors. And I'd like to provide this as a gift from Grace Trail at no cost to the town through generous, I can't see the rest of the slide, but I can tell you what it says, through generous donations of corporations and personal donations, as well as local businesses who are donating all of the materials and all of the services to upgrade the Grace Trail to the same level of beauty and durability that is now in place across the country. There are 8 licensed Grace Trails all across the country, and I would like to bring this Grace Trail up to the standards of the licensed Grace Trails that are going across the country. And I'd like to do that so we can support and enhance our community's well-being by providing an accessible resiliency tool that people can go and access anytime with anyone, families, organizations, wherever. BID Plymouth has a Grace Trail we put in during COVID. We put in a licensed trail at BID Plymouth during COVID to support the heroes, the families, and the staff, and it's well-walked today. And BID Community Development is strongly behind this project. David Gould, the Director of Energy and Environment, and Nick Fiella, the Superintendent of Parks and Forestry, both would like to see this project go forward. And this is what the Grace Trail would look like, similar to the Grace Trail we put in on the Navarino Nature Center and Grace Trail in Wisconsin. This is what the gratitude sign would look like. We have 5 300-pound boulders that have been donated, sitting in the Plymouth Parks Department, waiting to be installed if this is approved by you. And that's what it would look like. We'd have the stones engraved with the questions and put along the Grace Trail off the Seaside Trail. And that's what I have. Any questions?
Any questions or comments from the board?
Yeah.
Mr. Blitzer?
So where is the trail? Where will it be?
The trail would start at Nelson Park,
Okay,
and it goes all the way down, straight shot, right down to Atlantic Avenue.
okay.
With GRACE placed very carefully and safely along the trail with, I've walked it with David and Nick, and with all the consideration of making sure the current beautiful trail, that seaside trail, if you haven't walked it, is
Oh, no,
spectacular.
it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. And so this has been planned so the trail will not, none of the pavement will be damaged, none of the new shrubbery will be damaged. The rocks will be placed off the path, still on town land, and so that they can be enjoyed by anyone who walks and safely enjoyed, and the path should be protected by its installation.
And is it true there's going to be free refreshments down at Robbins Wharf at the end of the trail?
Yeah, I think John Gulimetti is going to be
The
providing.
A great host.
That's right, yes, there will be free refreshments.
No, that's
I
a-
hope we have a great
Yeah.
opening of the trail, is celebrating both the enhancement with the town, which, like I said, that trail is unbeatable as far as any location, I think, in the United States. It's just spectacular. And like I said, I have gotten feedback from hundreds of people just how much they enjoy the Grace Trail there.
Well, you're working with David and Nick, so I'm sure it's going to be first class. So
Yes. They are,
maybe I'll start walking again. So, anyway, thank you.
okay.
Mr.
Yes.
Canty?
So I, as a North Plymouth resident myself,
Yes.
I walk the Seaside Trail fairly often. And I know we recently, not too distant past, I think we have received a few donations, but one sizable donation from an individual to
Yes,
enhance the Seaside Trail.
right.
So, and I understand the rocks, I've seen the rocks, and I've seen some of the other existing signage and postings about the Grace Trail. I guess one concern, and I'm hoping you could address that concern, is like, I would hope, if you're, say, we have like the trail guide for walking trails within Plymouth, and people sometimes use those to find a trail they haven't walked before.
Right.
You know, that was built with preservation funds or open space or whatever. Will the signage for the Grace Trail, not the rocks, but the other signage, identify that the Grace Trail is part and parcel with the Seaside Trail?
Yes.
Similar to like the old exit 6 to old exit 7 is Route 3, but it's also technically Route 44 West. Nobody calls it that, but it is up on the sign. But you know that if you're directed to go up there, that
Right.
that is that. So I would just hope that people, because a lot of people would start walking the Seaside Trail around Nelson Park. I wouldn't want them to be confused, like, oh, I thought this was the Seaside Trail, but it says the Grace Trail. So can there be, the Grace Trail along the Seaside Trail or something of that nature of branding so that people are not confused?
Absolutely. I pictured it as the Plymouth Seaside Grace Trail.
Okay,
To put the two names together, and so there wouldn't be any confusion.
okay, as long as that was just my,
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? I see Mr. Malaguti wants to.
Good evening, Everett Malaguti, Vice Chair of the North Plymouth Steering Committee. I do have one question. We do have 4 signs that are on the abutting streets to the rail trail that guide direction to the access points onto the Seaside Trail. The steering committee worked hard to get those new signage up because they were non-existent in the past for actual directions. And since the North Plymouth Steering Committee was the antithesis of actually starting this project from its get-go along with CPC, I just wanted to make sure that those signs are not going to be renamed for the access, since the North Plymouth Steering Committee never heard anything from this presenter.
David, or do you, Ian, anything about that?
Good evening. For the record, David Gould, Director of Energy and Environment. Yeah, we have no intent of changing the name of the Seaside Trail. We've talked with Ann about that, incorporating Grace Trail. To Everett's point, we actually had a couple new signs made when we were doing the improvements to direct people down there. We actually had some extra signs made. So I have extra signs in my office. If those things get damaged, we can immediately replace those. So there's extras ready to go, and no intent to change the name or any of the directional signage. Quite honestly, I think the design of the Seaside Trail and the logo is really nice, and certainly don't have any intent to change it.
Okay, thank you. Have you bought the stones yet to put the markings on? Have you purchased
They
those?
were donated. They were all donated.
They're all donated?
Yeah, they were donated. The engraving has been donated, and the signage has been donated.
Okay. The
Yeah.
only reason I ask is we have a lot of granite and stuff at the, I believe, the old water barn. That's the only reason I brought it up.
Oh, okay.
But if you should need some benches maybe, or,
It's a great
I
idea.
think we have a lot of
Okay,
stuff up in the water barn, David. If,
that's awesome. That would be great.
you put it to use, Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I'll make-
Go
I'll
ahead.
make the motion to approve this. This is a great project.
Thank you.
Motion by Mr. Blitzer, second by Mr. Mahoney. Discussion? Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. And thank you very much. Ms. Barrett, Capital, Article 4.
Good evening. So there's a warrant article for, of some capital items and, I believe one, like, plan study project. I'm assuming that you got the list of projects in that warrant article. So there are 3 fire department projects, 1 school department project, a project from the cemetery department, 2 from the water, and 1 from the airport. Those departments are here tonight to answer any of your questions that you may have regarding those projects. The Capital Improvement Committee plans on reviewing those projects on Thursday of this week. So we'll come out with a capital improvement ranking process and sort of a recommendation on how we fund these projects for town meeting. But if you have any questions regarding any of those projects tonight, the departments are here.
Any
to answer.
questions for Lynn? No questions. Article 8. Yes, it does say. Was John coming back? Yeah.
Good evening, everybody.
One second, please. On Article 4, do we have a motion from the board?
Make the motion to approve.
Is that Mr. Bledge, is that a motion to include it on the town meeting warrant and recommend it to town meeting?
Yes.
I would second that motion.
Thank you.
Motion by Mr. Blitzer, second by Mr. Canty. Discussion? Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
Thank
Article
you,
8.
Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. For the record, my name is Rich Vaca. I'm the Conservation Planner for the town of Plymouth. We're here tonight to speak to Article 8, which is basically amending the Plymouth Wetlands Protection Bylaw to afford vernal pools a 200-foot zone of protection again. This is more or less of a housekeeping matter. Quick history here. The town had passed its Wetlands Protection Bylaw back in 1989. In 2010, we issued regulations that enacted that bylaw. In those regulations, there was a statement that vernal pools will have a 200-foot protective zone around them. In 2017 or 18, the town had subdivided a lot over on Long Pond Road. There's a vernal pool there. During the course of the permitting, a very astute engineer noted that the bylaw only afforded 100 feet protection to the vernal pools, where the regulations afforded 200. So the commission at that time, on the advice of counsel, Amy Quessel from KP Law, that we needed to bring the bylaw and the regulations into alignment. So the commission changed the regulations to reflect a 100-foot buffer zone as stipulated in the bylaw, with the intention of coming before town meeting and officially changing it back. The language in the bylaw doesn't actually even mention vernal pools, because at the time of its writing in 1989, the significance of vernal pools really wasn't apparent. It was later, around the 2010 range, that, we realized that these areas are important, and the commission included that language in their new bylaws. So we're here tonight basically for some housekeeping. Would like to change that to a 200-foot zone of protection in the bylaw, and then the commission will reissue their regulations to reflect a 200-foot zone again, which of course we've had for about 12 years now. So in a nutshell, that's what this is all about.
Mr. Canty?
Thank you, Rich. I guess looking at the materials, it stands out to me that while there is a definition section, and the definition section references in other definitions in some of these editions, vernal pools, there's no definition for vernal pool in the definition section. And I think having I understand what a vernal pool is. However, I'm not sure what the lower limit of a vernal pool is versus, say, a large puddle. And not to be flippant, but I think it would be worthwhile to define a vernal pool as part of these regulations, so that there's no question about what a vernal pool is and what requires the 200-foot setback. Because otherwise, there's a level of ambiguity between what's some other body of water that is occasionally full of water and occasionally not, and what is a vernal pool that requires a 200-foot setback. So could a definition of vernal pool, I don't know if it's defined in like the CMRs or some other source that we could pull from and just use here, but could we add a definition of vernal pool if we were to put this on the warrant, so that people would have clarity as to what requires this 200-foot setback?
Yes, sir, we could do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rich, good to see you here tonight.
Good to see you too again.
The state requirement is 100 feet, correct?
Yes, it's a resource area like all others.
What is the significance of the 200 feet for us here in Plymouth?
Well, the science tells us that, a vernal pool is basically defined by the organisms that use that pool for reproduction. Mole salamanders, wood frogs, and fairy shrimp. All three are considered to be endangered or threatened species here in Massachusetts. Most of the time, these animals live in the upland, and they visit the pool usually on the first warm, rainy night in March to reproduce. And what the science tells us is that these organisms can range anywhere between 200 feet and 1,000 feet from that pool. And it may not be actually circular. There may be, different trails that they use along the way from their population centers down to the pool. So, like the Cape Cod Commission affords their vernal pools a 350-foot buffer zone. Many of the towns that I've worked for in the past have offered the 200. to give those pools that extra space that those organisms need. And I'll say this, that since 2010, it's been 200 feet here in Plymouth. And it was only this astute young engineer that pointed out the difference between the two. So that's what we're here to correct. But, you know, in short, David, the more space we give them, the better.
Sure. I thank you for that explanation. I assume you're not going for the 1,000 feet, because you don't want to be drawn and quartered over a fairy shrimp.
Well, you know, I mean, the thought crossed my mind. However, though, I think reasonableness would be to just go back to the 200-foot that we've had.
So just to reiterate, for a decade plus, you were, the commission and prior to that, the committee was enforcing a 200-foot setback.
That's correct.
Were there any major problems with that?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hey, Mr.
Charlie.
Vaca,
How
thank
are
you.
ya?
That was my question, too. So it's just really a housekeeping
Correct.
issue. There's no properties that are affected by this, that you know of, no identified properties?
That is correct.
Okay, so, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll move approval.
With the stipulation that we include, a definition of vernal pool in this iteration as we move forward.
So moved.
And is, Mr. Mahoney, is that motion to include Article 8 on the warrant and recommend it to town meeting once that definition is ironed out?
Yes.
I would second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Mahoney, second by Mr. Canty. Discussion? Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr.
I
Bletzer?
vote yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
Gentlemen,
Thank you, Mr. Vaca.
Good night, everyone.
Article 18.
Good evening. I'm here tonight representing the Finance Department, the Treasurer Collector, Patty Meechan. But we're requesting that the town adopt by local option, Mass General Law, Chapter 203C, Prudent Investor Law. It is a local option for cities and towns to give cities and towns some more flexibility on being able to invest in products that we weren't able to invest in before. Prior to this, Prudent Investor exists, and it's used by like the Plymouth Retirement Board. So when they invest the funds at the Plymouth Retirement Board level, they use Prudent Investor law. At the local level, we were required to abide by sort of other Mass General laws for investing, say, in stocks. There were only 12 stocks on the legal list that we could invest in. By using Prudent Investor, for example, on the legal list, the only IT tech stock that's on there is Hewlett-Packard. So if we wanted to invest in something else like Google or Apple or something like that, this provision would give us that local option to be able to do that. So it's not saying that we are going to do that, it just actually gives us a little bit more flexibility when we are investing. And the only funds that are allowed to invest under Prudent Investor are actual trust funds that are bequeathed to the town for a specific purpose. For example, scholarship funds. We have quite a few of those that have been bequeathed to the town with specific provisions that so much be held as principal and then earnings be used for scholarship, and with certain provisions in there. So those types of trust funds, we would use Prudent Investor to be able to invest in some other things that may be able to reap more benefit than ones that we had been investing in before. It would not apply to like our stabilization funds or nuclear management or meals tax or those other funds. Those funds are sort of, it excludes funds that are supported by taxpayer dollars. It's really just the trust funds that are bequeathed to the town.
Mr. Canty?
So, what are sort of like the meets and bounds of prudent invest? Like, you can invest in individual stocks that are like Fortune 500 stocks? Can you invest in like penny stocks? Or can you invest in like hedge funds or index funds? What type of things can you invest in?
The law for prudent investor is sort of giving you the parameters to be a prudent investor.
Okay.
So you would establish, so we would, if adopted, we would add the prudent investor to our investment policy. So we have a policy that the select board adopted like 5 years ago.
Okay.
So we would update our investment policy, and then we would put provisions in there that may have those, meets and bounds as to what we would allow ourselves to do, so to speak. We would never obviously invest in anything that's illegal, I mean,
good.
That. I know, like, on the retirement side, we can't invest in anything that has tobacco or, cigarette kind of things like that.
Okay.
So we would sort of try to maybe mimic, what the retirement board's investment policy is, but that's something that we would work with the select board, and the select board would have to adopt that.
But, I mean, if you wanted to, could you
Yes.
invest in something like penny stocks? Or would that be because those are very volatile.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would not recommend anything like that, and we
Right.
would use our investment, so we right now use Rockland Trust as
Sure.
our investment vehicle, for a lot of the funds that we have as trust funds. So we would, anything that we would invest in, we would obviously use their recommendation,
Okay.
and something that we would be able to, invest in.
So you'd get like advice from a financial advisor with a fiduciary duty to the town?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Mr. Blitzer?
Lynn, I think you told us last year, the investments were netted us a couple of $1 million. What was that figure you threw at us?
I'm not sure what presentation I was,
I don't know which one, but I think, do you remember, David?
because we have a lot of trusts, we call them trust funds, but
Right.
they're like the special purpose stabilization funds, nuclear mitigation.
But was the number 2 million, that might be low, but we,
Of all of those, we probably earned about 2 million. These,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have, these particular
no, I'm
trusts.
saying from what you invested last year. So this will be the same type of,
Oh, I mean, even on a general fund level, we earned interest of over $4 million. That's just a general fund. That doesn't include any of the trust funds or special purpose. So we earned a lot more in those other ones. I mean, I don't think I've ever necessarily given you a report on what we've earned on all of our different trust funds. I can certainly do that,
well,
but
I
we
was
did
just going
very
to say
well.
that I thought that's what you told me, so I'm very confident that you'll invest wisely.
Okay.
So I think we're in good hands.
Thank you. And again, that policy would be updated with you, if we incorporated any new language regarding prudent investor.
Good, okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we include Article 18 on the warrant and recommend it to town meeting. I would second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Golden, second by Mr. Canty. Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes,
Mr. Golden?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you, Lynn.
thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Article 14.
Good evening. This is, I believe, in regards to the Eversource easement at Stevens Field. and,
Yes.
Myself and Bill Coyle are here. Would you like a short presentation?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Short one would be good.
This article pertains to Eversource's request for an easement at Stevens Field. Now that that project has been completed, I think they're ready to put that into play. Currently, we've been operating under a license agreement with them, which was approved by this board on June 18th of 2024. I think it was admin note 3. So they're looking for an easement rather than a license agreement.
And this is standard practice, right?
Yes.
Housekeeping? Any questions from the board? Pleasure of the board.
I would make a motion, David, unless you have a question.
No, I was going to make a motion, but you feel free to since you've got the language down.
That's it, yeah.
I would make a motion that we include Article 14 on the warrant and recommend.
To the town meeting.
And I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Golden. Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Bledsoe?
Yes.
Mr. Golden?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass over the administrative notes and go right to public comment. Mr. Tavares?
All right. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just following up on a recent COPC meeting. Thanks for giving me time during public comment to address this. As you know, on August 21st, as chair of the COPC, I sent you an email asking for time, and you suggested that we come before you to talk about the land acknowledgement agreement during public comment. I think you know the history of it. I think almost everybody was in the room, but I'm sure, Mr. Bletzer, you've been brought up to speed as to what happened there. Catherine Holmes, the chair of Precinct 9, put forward a motion to remove the land acknowledgement from the COPC agenda and refer the subject to the Select Board for consideration. The motion was seconded. There was spirited discussion and a roll call vote resulting in an affirmative vote of 12-6, which is what I put in my email towards you. So that's the background on that very briefly. Myself, as a member of the community, I'm definitely respectfully asking that or recommend that the Select Board task their advisory committee of No Place for Hate, which also consists of a Select Board appointee, to work with the Herring Pond Wampanoag Town Council, Town Manager, whom else you see fit, to work towards coming up with respectful language that all can use to unify together. I believe that as a community, we should all feel it is our job to not only look out for our current residents, future residents, but also the residents that were here long before the first Thanksgiving. As I've heard many of you say, we are all one town. As town leaders, one of our responsibilities is to help the disenfranchised and far too often overlooked amongst us, to feel welcomed and respected as members of our community. And while my notes are all over the place, so I apologize as I skipped a little bit ahead, but while the road at the beginning of a task like this may seem daunting, and there will also be varying viewpoints, I'm reminded of the words by a firsthand witness to the native residents, their kindness towards the Pilgrims when they came here. And it's actually my 10th great-grandfather, Governor Bradford. In writing about taking on involved tasks, he said, "Actions are accompanied with great difficulties, and both must be enterprised and overcome with answerable courage." So I'd like to ask the Select Board to find that answerable courage to take action on this topic. Task your advisory committee, No Place for Hate, to work for all of our residents. I appreciate the time. I wanted to keep it brief. I do know that John Platt from No Place for Hate would like to speak after me if that's acceptable to the board. But thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on the public comment?
Good evening. I'm John Platt. I'm the co-chair of No Place for Hate Committee. At our May 22nd meeting, we voted to adopt the land acknowledgement as developed by the League of Women Voters in conjunction with the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. We now read this statement at the beginning of our meetings. We took this action because we felt that the acknowledgement, while arguably only symbolic, is a simple but powerful step toward recognizing the presence and historical significance of the herring pond wampanoags in Plymouth. At our June 12th meeting, we voted to recommend that the town of Plymouth formally adopt an official land acknowledgement to be posted to the town's website and to be used by all boards and committees to recognize our valuable relationship with the indigenous communities of Plymouth. We believe that one of the reasons that our committee exists is to advise the Select Board on issues such as this, and we strongly encourage you to take action. We propose working together with you, the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe, and the League of Women Voters to create a land acknowledgement that everyone finds acceptable and which properly and respectfully recognizes our indigenous neighbors. Perhaps one or more of you can be designated to work on this with us. Finally, I would like to remind you of a document which was proposed by No Place for Hate and unanimously approved by the Select Board at a meeting in July 2020, entitled The Town of Plymouth Pledge. I am told that it was put on the town's website shortly after that meeting, but apparently got lost during the website revisions of 2022. I'm going to provide you copies of this document, as well as the relevant part of the minutes from that meeting. In the interest of time, I will just read one sentence from the pledge. Quote, "We pledge to support public policy solutions that will prominently, openly, and enthusiastically promote racial and social equity in all aspects of human affairs and to work to eradicate racism from our society." End quote. We believe that the Town of Plymouth Pledge gives strong support to the creation of a land acknowledgement. Thank you. And next, Phoebe Flynn of the League of Women Voters would like to make a brief statement.
With your permission, Jenny. So my name's Phoebe Flynn, as a board member for the League of Women Voters of the Plymouth area, and also the chair for their Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We support the adoption of land acknowledgements. Land acknowledgements recognize and respect Indigenous people as traditional stewards of the lands we all share today. Celebrate the enduring relationship between Indigenous people and these territories, and demonstrate community commitment to equity for all citizens by supporting a step toward honoring the truth and achieving healing and reconciliation. Here in Plymouth, we celebrate one aspect of our shared history that dates back only a few hundred years, where Herring Pond and other Wampanoag tribes are tied to these lands with a rich 12,000-year history. Because of this, we respectfully request that this town adopt a land acknowledgement to recognize and acknowledge Wampanoag ties to this land in a public way, demonstrating the valuable relationship we have with the Indigenous people of Plymouth. I know that both Melissa Freddy, members of her tribe, Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe, as well as Jackie Saltalamakia, we're going to try to get on remotely. I'm not sure if they're here today, but they absolutely offer their support if they are available. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on the public comment? Jade, anyone online? Paul?
Paul, you need to unmute. You're currently muted online. You're now unmuted. But we cannot hear you.
Well, seeing that, if he comes
left the
back
meeting.
on, you can just let me know and we'll buzz right back.
Sounds good.
Okay. Any questions on the administrative notes?
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I would, it's not really a question, but I would comment that we should modify to recommend each of these to town meeting, just in case we're asked, in case we want to, who knows how FinCom's going to vote on any of these, so that way we can at least.
guys, friends of yours.
They are, but nevertheless, this gives us options.
Would you like to read them?
If I could.
Oh, please.
So I would make unless there are questions from any of my colleagues, I would make a motion to approve administrative notes 2 through 6 as a group, modifying that we would be voting to approve and add them to the warrant as well as recommend each of these articles to town meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Canty, 2 through 6, second by Mr. Golden. Discussion? Comments? Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
And Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Okay, and that brings us back to 1.
I would make a motion that we approve Administrative Note 1. Second.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Golden. Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Unanimous. Town managers report, please.
Good evening, Derek Brindisi, Town Manager. I rise tonight just to focus my only discussion item for tonight on the issue that the town has been responding to with the outbreak of Eastern equine encephalitis here in this community. As you all know, we have received a lot of media attention since last Friday, and I think it's important to talk about it this evening, so I just have a few things that I want to focus my energy on. I mean, as we all know, every year, we deal with nuisance mosquitoes. Oftentimes, we're having conversations about West Nile virus and protecting ourselves against West Nile virus. This year in particular, the conversation is centered on EEE. And it's really important to note that why have we responded in such a way that we have responded? It's not a knee-jerk reaction. EEE is a fatal disease. It has fatality rates in some communities upwards of 70%. We do know that there was an individual in New Hampshire who contracted EEE who has since died this season. We do know there's an 80-year-old male in the southern Worcester County area that has contracted EEE. We have mosquitoes. So what happens throughout the mosquito season is State Department of Public Health officials, they sample for mosquitoes, and they sample those mosquitoes for certain diseases, West Nile virus and EEE in particular. So we knew about a month ago that we had mosquitoes in our community that were carrying the EEE virus. Most recently, an animal has been infected with EEE. So now we know that as there's starting to be transmission from the mosquito to animals. And again, as I pointed out, we know that humans have been infected in our community. And so as you know, through our Health and Human Services Department, and great credit goes to Commissioner Brady and the work that she's been doing with her team, our Director of Public Health, Karen Keene, and Casey Kennedy, who was here for a few hours this morning, our new communications corner, have really been trying to get the message out to the community on what they need to do to protect themselves. And so two things in particular I want to talk about tonight. So first and foremost, last Friday, we had to make the decision. We had a conference call on Friday with local mosquito experts, with state officials, with local health officials, with the school department, the school superintendent, and really had the difficult conversation on what the town needs to do to protect our residents. And at that time, we had to make the decision, unfortunately, to close all of our parks, our playgrounds, and our athletic fields from the period of dusk till dawn. Why dusk till dawn? Because that is the period of time where mosquitoes are active, the adults are out there, and that's when they're biting. That, we do recognize, poses a significant burden on parents and school-aged children that are trying to use those fields during that period of time. I can tell you right now that we didn't take that decision lightly. As a father whose son who played tackle football from 4th grade all the way up to his senior year, he lost his senior year of football because of the pandemic. So I do recognize the stress that this decision has made on athletes. But in saying all that, our athletes are not losing their season. They have to modify their schedule to play and practice during the times where it's still daylight and it's prior to dusk. So maybe there's no Friday night lights this football season. They have to move their games to Saturday afternoons. but we think it's in the best interest of our community to protect those. Again, we're talking about a disease that has a high fatality rate. I know I said it once, I'll probably say it a couple more times. We're talking about people dying. And so we're trying to do the best that we can to prevent that from happening. And so the other issue that has arisen as of Saturday, we had a conference call Saturday afternoon with state health officials who declared an emergency. And I'm going to talk about what they have decided to do. The State Department of Public Health and the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, they have invoked aerial spraying, which is different. So typically, we use ground spraying that's on the back of pickup trucks that go through our neighborhoods and spray for adult mosquitoes. Aerial spraying is only used in these extreme circumstances. And what they told us during that conference call is that ground level spraying has not been effective this year in reducing the number of adult mosquitoes. So the state went to aerial spraying. You'll see here, and we've been trying to push this as far and wide as possible. You'll see that the aerial spraying will take place from dusk till dawn this evening, so it's already probably began, in that area. So that's a screenshot of the map. You can go to this website, and Jade, maybe if you can help us navigate this website. So this is just a screenshot if you go to this website. So if you go to this website, those folks that are watching at home that are interested, maybe it won't connect. Let's see. So while she's trying to connect, I'll talk a little bit. So when you go to the website, you see the map, you see the red outline border. That border, everything within that border is where there'll be aerial spraying. If you're not quite certain whether or not you fall within that range, on the website, you'll see right here, you have it, Jade. You can see if you're going to find a location, scroll down a little bit, please. So you see the map. That's the map I just showed you on the PowerPoint. You can click into this box. You can put in your address, and it'll tell you whether or not the property address is going to be within that spraying area. I think you got to put Plymouth. Yeah, there you go. It should zoom out. So you'll see right there, this shows, so Jay put in 26 Court Street, Plymouth, Mass., which is the location of Town Hall. You can see that Town Hall with tonight's spraying is outside of the area to be sprayed. So it's important for folks to realize that this is a tool that they can use to determine whether or not spraying is going to take place in their area. Can we go back to the PowerPoint? So that's the aerial spraying. We also, as I mentioned, we have truck-mounted ground spraying, so that title is actually inaccurate. It should be ground spraying. And so you'll see in this slide, these are the streets that will be sprayed tomorrow morning from the period of, I believe it's 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. with ground-mounted sprayers. So this operation is conducted by the Plymouth Mosquito Control District. I can barely read those, but it looks like it's Bourne Road, Lincoln Street, Linden Street, Long Pond Road. So that'll take place tomorrow. Again, a different URL. You can go to this website and you can do a couple of things. So first and foremost, if you don't want your neighborhood, if you don't want your home to be sprayed, if you go to this website, to the Plymouth Mosquito Control Program, you can ask to opt out of spraying using the truck product. In addition to that, you can get a bunch of educational resources and information on what the chemicals they use and what you need to do to keep yourself safe. What I would say to you, if you can go back to the PowerPoint, Jade, what I would say to folks that are listening at home, for spraying events, I would encourage you to shut your windows, shut off your air conditioning for that evening, so this chemical kills the mosquito on contact. I've been told by the experts that this will dissipate a few hours later, so that's why they end spraying at 4 a.m., because when school opens up by 6 a.m., the product has dissipated and is no longer in the environment. It does not have a negative effect on the water quality, and I would just suggest that you should certainly keep your pets indoor during the spraying activity. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Derek, folks can opt out of, residents can opt out of ground spraying, but not aerial spraying, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
That is correct.
And the only business that's allowed to opt out of aerial spraying is a certified organic farm that has filed their certification with the state in advance of this.
That is correct. So there are some opt-out for certain industries. I believe beekeepers are another industry that can opt out as well, I believe. So there are a few industries that can opt out of aerial spraying, but our primary residents would not be able to do that. Unfortunately, we received a lot of media attention because of what's going on, but at the same time, Casey Kennedy, again, our communications corner, working closely with the Department of Health and Human Services, have fielded a number of phone calls, and these aren't just local media outlets. You can see here, yesterday, NBC Nightly News was in, Fox News did an interview live today, CNN has been in, and a lot of the Boston media outlets as well. So for obvious reasons, we're gaining a lot of national attention as to what's going on in this community and what we're doing to protect our community from the infection of EEE. And I'll end, and I'll certainly answer any questions, but I want to go to this last slide. This was an interview conducted by Fox Channel News. Commissioner Brady met with this media outlet to talk about the things that we're doing here locally to prevent infection. Assuming we can get audio.
Massachusetts residents on high alert as officials confirm a case of the mosquito virus Eastern equine encephalitis, or EEE. The case prompting towns to take action to stop the spread as it could lead to severe illness and even death. Let's bring in Michelle Brady. She is the Commissioner of Health and Human Services in the town of Plymouth, Massachusetts. Michelle, great to have you with us. So one case, I guess, in Worcester County, an 80-year-old man came down with Eastern equine encephalitis. How serious is the threat?
Hi, thank you so much for having us. Of course, it is a serious threat. We do take it seriously. EEE is rare, but it definitely has serious side effects that can potentially be fatal. So I know for our community and communities around Massachusetts, we certainly are taking this serious.
All right, so the Massachusetts Department of Public Health Commissioner Robbie Goldstein said this, quote, "We have not seen an outbreak of EEE for 4 years in Massachusetts. This year's outbreak and activity raised the risk for communities in parts of the state. We need to use all our available tools to reduce the risk and protect our communities. We're asking everyone to do their part." So what are you doing there in Plymouth, Massachusetts to do your part?
Sure. First and foremost, giving our residents and visitors information, making sure they're aware, right? I mean, we are at a high status, as indicated by the Department of Health and Human Services, and we definitely want residents to remain vigilant, be aware of the high-risk status by DPH and in their town, and take necessary precautions to maintain minimal risk exposure. We have closed parks, public parks and fields in our town from dusk to dawn as a precaution.
So the Director of Public Health, as we pointed out, said this is the first time in 4 years. Why are conditions suddenly ripe for this year?
It tends to go in cycles is what I'm told, and about every 4 to 5 years it does come around, especially in Massachusetts. Swamps are most affected, and we seem to be a nice breeding ground for that. So we are seeing an uptick. We're definitely on top of it. We want to make sure, again, the public remains vigilant, know the precautions, know what to do, how to avoid the high peak times, and what to do personally.
So up there, it's Eastern equine encephalitis. Down here in the Washington, D.C. area, it's West Nile virus. A very famous victim of West Nile is Anthony Fauci. He thinks he was bitten by an infected mosquito in his backyard. How do you know if you've got one of these diseases? Because my understanding is the symptoms are fairly similar.
Yeah, the symptoms are, I mean, I think most people recognize if they've been bitten by a mosquito. And if you feel an onset of symptoms, many of the symptoms are, pretty common, as you said, include fever, headache, vomiting, diarrhea, joint muscle pain, seizures as well. But you should always err on the side of caution. And if you are concerned and have a mosquito bite, contact your doctor immediately so you can make sure that you're safe.
All right, well, to folks out there, if you're feeling those symptoms, it's probably not because you spent too long at the pub. It's because you might have gotten a mosquito bite. Michelle, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
So again, great job by Michelle and her team. And again, I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. This has consumed a lot of our energy and time since this past Friday. And we'll continue, as the commission pointed out, to pay attention to any patterns, any trends. Certainly we hope that we don't have to announce an individual being infected over the course, but we will be in this until at least the first hard frost. So we will have these measures in place. I would suggest probably until early to mid-October. Again, we gotta have that first hard frost before we can lift these measures. Pending any questions, I'll turn it back to the board.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Mr. Canty?
Thank you, Derek, and I just want to thank you for keeping us informed about this as it has come along, as well as the other Department of Public Health, Health and Human Services, and obviously the state is working on this too, so that's great. And I did turn to the chairman earlier in the presentation and comment that it's nice to see the Old Colony Memorial covering Plymouth issues again, so it's nice that we made that. Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to echo what Kevin just said, and a job well done by all for trying to keep the citizens safe. Nice job. Thank you. And anything else, Derek, on your, Charlie, do you have something you want to say?
Just, and maybe, I don't know if I should bring this up, but I see a lot Facebook, I don't even know why I look at it, but about outdoor dining, there's nothing we can do about that. Because they're trying to justify, well, if they can have outdoor dining, why can't we have our parks open? So,
Yeah, so parks are public property and we control public property. We have left it up to private businesses to make that decision, whether or not they understand the severity of the issue. We've communicated with businesses. We've been working with the chamber. They understand the severity of the situation and the current context in which we're working in. If they decide to close, that'll be up to them. If they decide to stay open, then we would hope that they would provide proper public health protection information so folks can make a good, healthy choice.
and I just want to, I know we have a communications director, so I probably shouldn't be speaking, but when we had that was a mandate from the governor for the outdoor, when they closed when all the COVID restrictions were put on. That wasn't from the local, that was done from the governor, so.
Yeah, the governor closed all
Right. It wasn't-
congregate
yeah, it
settings,
wasn't a
absolutely.
town.
And so force folks to go outside. That's right.
Good, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? You all set with your report now, Derek?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. I believe we have the gentleman that we couldn't get on before. Hello, Paul, you're muted. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I realized that I was appointed last week, so I want to thank you for that. And I'm sorry I wasn't at that last week's meeting. The email ended up in my other folder, which is kind of similar to a spam folder with a few more rules. But listen, I'm honored to be appointed by Plymouth's chapter for No Place for Hate. The mission of No Place for Hate is a sacred mission. And Plymouth is America's hometown. People look to us to set an example, and we all have a duty to be of service and to propagate fraternal feelings towards our fellow citizens, and both the minority and the majority. And Plymouth has proved itself to be a paragon of town government. Plymouth has a committee that's actually dedicated to preventing hatred and dedicated to propagating goodwill. Plymouth still leads the way through all these centuries. My dedication to No Place for Hate is a result of a synergy of values and a shared history. Many of our members in No Place for Hate were affected by the Holocaust. And my family, my aunt, my grandfather, and my uncle, and the rest of my family were put into Dachau in Germany, concentration camp. And while I was an undergrad at Suffolk University, I wrote about that. And an alum saw it and gave me a scholarship to go to Central Europe to study the effects of fascism and communism on Central Europe at Charles University. And I can tell you right now, despite all the time I spent studying the propagation of hatred through this, through the fascist movement in the 30s and 40s, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around the fact that a country that was essentially a Western democracy, turned into a fascist state that murdered millions of people. And so, I believe that, the effects of fascism and communism on Central Europe, is an example, for us to follow, and make sure that, we prevent, hate crimes and whether it's political or just an individual. And I actually did go to Auschwitz and Birkenau when I was in Central Europe, and it was amazing to see, people actually were collapsing in the gas chamber. There was one gas chamber that remained. They tried to get rid of the gas chambers, but one of them is still there. And people, the emotional toll of a half century of grief and experiencing being in the gas chamber where
Excuse
their
me,
family members.
You had your 3 minutes, you're almost finished, or do you need more? How much more time?
I'm so sorry. I just
Don't be
want to
sorry.
thank you guys for your appointment, for appointing me to the No Place for Hate Committee, and giving me an opportunity to stay true to my values. And I want to thank the Augusta Select Board for this opportunity, and I'm honored. I'm sorry for going over the time.
And for the record, your name, please. I should have asked you that in the beginning, but
Paul Adams.
thank you. Have a good night. Anyone else wishing to speak on the public comment? Select Board discussion, new business? Mr. Canty, then Mr. Bletzer, then Mr. Mahoney.
As we prepare for further article reviews, I did receive through town council, because I was inquiring about it, there are some citizens petition articles that I think are outside the scope of town meeting. The moderator agrees. So I will certainly forward that information to the town manager and to the chair about what these particular articles are. And we can perhaps not, because obviously any time we spend on town meeting articles is time we're not spending on something else.
Right.
Anytime we spend on a specific town meeting article, we're not spending on another town meeting article. And I think it would be a better use of our time to prioritize the ones that will actually be able to be acted on at town meeting floor versus ones that would not be. But more to come on that, but I just wanted to flag that issue as our town meeting warrant reviews continue.
Mr. Bletzer?
Yeah, thank you. I just make just a quick announcement that because of the EEE with the outdoor parks and recreations being closed, Project Arts has their last event Wednesday night, and we've made arrangements, or they've made arrangements with Memorial Hall, that it will be a free event at Memorial Hall, the same time, you know, so you'll be welcome. So the show will go on. It's the last show, so I want everybody to know that, so thank you.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to compliment Mr. Bletzer, Mr. Brindisi, and Mr. Gould, the department head, for last night's presentation. The room was effectively standing room only on the Full Sail. Mr. Gould led, excellent presentation, answered questions. Charlie also participated, and I thought it was overall it was very positive. We took their input. I think there's 2 or 3 variables that we know that they don't want to see down there, but I think moving forward, it was a great jumping off point.
Okay. Anything under letters? Old business? Okay. As we adjourn, the next meeting will be on September 4th at 4 p.m. Okay? So get right in and, okay, we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.